Let's join Heather and special education teacher and aspiring BCBA Cass O'Hara from our district partner, the Academies of South Bend, as they talk about this week's high leverage practice.
Welcome to Little Bits of TLC, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of education. Join our host, Heather Volchko, as this season we focus on high leverage practices, HLPs. Each episode will examine a different HLP, essential strategies designed to enhance teaching and improve outcomes across various educational settings. These practices focus on collaboration, assessment, social, emotional, behavioral support, and instruction, benefiting all K-12 students. I hope you're ready to be both challenged and inspired, because this season is all about mastering the HLPs. This is Little Bits of TLC. Looking for something that actually fits your life? TLC University is here for that. Each week, we spotlight something different. A webinar with real-world insights, a hangout-style interview, and a hands-on workshop or a Q&A where we answer your questions. It's flexible, it's self-paced, and most come with CEUs. So whether you're looking to grow, reflect, or just listen in, there's something here for you. And it's all in one place. university.thresholdlearning.org. That's where you'll find show notes, professional blogs, a full catalog of ACE-accredited courses, and downloadable resources. It all just keeps growing. So whether you're walking the dog, commuting, or taking a breather between the daily grind, TLC University meets you where you are. Head to university.thresholdlearning.org and check out what's new this week. See you then.
Teachers assess individual student needs and adapt curriculum materials and tasks so that students can meet instructional goals. Teachers select materials and tasks based on student needs, use relevant technology, and make modifications by highlighting relevant information, changing task directions, and decreasing amounts of material. Teachers make strategic decisions on content coverage, like essential curriculum elements, meaningfulness of tasks to meet stated goals, and criteria for student success.
This week, we're talking about high leverage practice number 13, adapting curriculum tasks and materials for specific learning goals. And Cass, you are an incredibly creative instructor in all of the different ways that you help your students figure out how to learn these skills that you are putting in front of them. For you in your practice, what does this look like?
Well, it does, like you said, show up in a lot of different ways, and being creative is very helpful. But it feels like kind of that own personal challenge, right? Where it's like, okay, well, that's not working. How do I get to them? Because I'm not one to give up, right? That's kind of how the mentality that we have to have when we're working with this population of students who are very deserving of services. But I gotta be a little hard-headed and say, okay, that angle didn't work. How can I use something that they're good at to help me focus in on that goal, right? If you're not so good at writing because you can't hold a pencil, I might use Velcro instead. So instead of being able to draw a line to match, maybe I'm going to have a little Velcro laminated sheet where you match that way because your skills are better that way. Because sometimes we want to focus on that. Oh, I'm just trying to get them to write. Well, writing is broken down into so many other different skills, right? So when we look at things that help us understand what those skills look like, now in my clinical setting, we're looking at the ABLs, AFLs, the VB map. I use the VB map a lot. And what that kind of told us is, what are these milestones that are age appropriate for this student or this person? And how are we going to adapt those different skills that they do have? Sometimes we have skills that they're really, really good at, but they maybe don't have the foundational skills for that to even make sense. So sometimes we have to work that back. Understanding what that trajectory is vital to being able to break down what it is you're trying to teach them. Now, what I mean by that is to essentially say, like, if I am trying to get them to spell their name, right? I'm not necessarily going to worry about all the other parts that might go to that. If writing the name isn't important, then let them verbally spell it. Uh-oh. Well, what if my student doesn't use verbal language like that? Awesome. Do they have an AAC device that you can program letters into, or you can pull that sheet up or teach them how to do that so where they can spell their name that way? What if your student is working on peer interactions and trying to initiate play in an appropriate way? Maybe all they do is throw toys at the other students to try to get them to play with them. Well, let's teach them how to do that. Well, it's not quite the step of just, oh, they're going to initiate the interaction. They're just going to start it. Well, what does that look like? What does that look like? That requires them to say something, right? That also requires them to get a student's attention in an appropriate way. That also requires them to stand and wait and listen for a response. And so all of these different skills need to be pushed to the side, broken down, and let's identify where we're struggling. If they walk up to the student and then throw the toy, well, hey, you know what? They know how to walk up to the student. They know how to start that. So what we need to do is catch them, right? We need to stop. Oh, they walked up. Great. Now we're going to show you we can tap on that student's shoulder and get their attention. Uh-oh. Well, now they have to tell them that they want to play. What if my student doesn't use verbal language like that other student does? Well, what if they have picture exchange communication and they can hand that student an icon or hand a teacher that? Or they have an AAC device that says, hey, will you play with me? And all they have to do is push that button. You're going to teach them that. But what we have to do is break down these fundamental steps that build up to appropriate play with a peer. Yeah, our goals can be that. And we identify that, man, their major issues, that's where their behaviors come up. That's when they stop learning, right? Is when they have to interact. Well, great, let's teach them how. But we have to understand that that's not a simple concept. Something that comes easily to us might take 6, 7 steps for a student in our classrooms or in our care. So we have to understand that breaking these steps down is identifying what it is that we're actually trying to measure, what it is that we're trying to teach them, what is the skill, and what are the other pieces that don't really matter. Yeah, sure. We might have to break a little bit from social norms, right? It might not be the usual on a playground to see a student walk up and use an AAC device or bring a student over or a teacher over to a communication board that's on the playground to explain that they need to go to the bathroom, right? That might not be normal, but why can't it be? Why can't we break that down? Why can't we make that normal and acceptable, right? And so, what we're going to be able to do is change what we do and how we measure those typical tasks. In a perfect world, we'd be able to say every student that needs to learn to write will learn it this way. It will be successful. They will learn it in this amount of time and it will be fine and they will always keep that skill. That's cool. That's not the world we live in and that's not how learning works. And I think we understand that in a way as educators and clinicians, but what's really important is identifying that these age appropriate and these milestones and all of these things in theory are great, but not necessarily exactly where each person needs to be in the same trajectory that each person is going to reach it.
So you have covered a ton of ground with all of these different examples, from what tools you're using to how you're laying out instruction, to then how you're within that instruction trying to kind of reinforce and catch these different opportunities of expressing new skills, to then like how are you actually just embedding that into just a normal way of living life, right? Like there are accommodations and modifications at every single piece of what you just walked through. But I want to make sure that, since a lot of our listeners are living in the educational space, I think in a clinical setting, it's just the strategies, right? Like
Mhm.
this is just what works for this individual. And this is how they learn, or this is how, we've been
Mhm.
able to adjust some things around them so that they can hit these goals. In a classroom setting, walk me through what that could look like and somewhat of like that instructional day to day.
Yeah, it's so easy when we're working one on one with a student to create whatever world or strategy that works for just them. That's so real. And in theory, oh, we can throw this strategy for this student and this strategy at this student and this strategy at this student. But I am one person with 15 students that need different strategies, 50 different strategies at the same time. How do we do that? Let's break that down. So it is woven into what we do. So, for example, if I recognize that a student, let's say we're doing a calendar on the carpet, right? And some students don't know their numbers, and some don't know their letters, and some don't know the songs that we sing to do the days of the week. That's okay, because here's what we're going to do. We are going to work functionally on multiple levels at the same time. And I know that sounds crazy, so don't get scared. But what that looks like is some students, let's say they're really great at writing and not so good about speaking out socially in front of other students. We're going to give them whiteboards, right? Or we're going to come closer when we ask a group question because they still deserve to voice when they know the answer to. Maybe they'll hold their whiteboard up, right? Maybe we have more visual learners. So as we're doing the ABCs, and the students that maybe don't know theirs quite yet, We're going to be pointing at that visual model as we go. But maybe we have other students that don't have to look at that visual model, that maybe are sitting in a different location or a different way, but we are all learning at the same time at different strategies. And so remember that different strategies don't always have to work at a one-on-one basis, and you can be doing them at the same time, right? And you probably already are. Right. And a lot of the times I use calendar because I think that's a very significant time I've seen not only represented in my classroom, but represented across my school as well, where these teachers who are all presenting the same information are doing it at different grade levels, but different methods at the same time. So I know that they have some students that don't quite know their letters or can't do that math for the day, but they're, oh, great. Well, you know what? We're gonna weave in some scaffolding. We're gonna weave in some different embedded learning techniques that we've already done, right? And we're already doing. I have visuals on the walls, but the students that don't need the visuals aren't going to use them. They're not. They know. And if they don't have to look at you, they probably won't. But that's okay because those visuals are there as strategies for other students. So remember that as you're instructing in your classroom, if the kid's looking away, but they're still on task and they're still learning, you're actually doing it. You're doing that high leverage practice because there's also students that are learning and using that visual as well while everyone is learning at their pace. So it doesn't have to be an intimidating thing. It can be something that we embed and weave in the structure of each plan, right? Identify that I have some visual learners or I have some hands-on learners. It's in what we do every single day. It's how you learned to teach, right? Scaffolding and changing that approach or varying what you use to get whichever skill you're trying to teach across. So in my classroom, just for a plain example, I might stand there and I know that I have one kid that does not speak in front of anybody else, but he does really well if I give him a clue. And so he is allowed one clue or to phone a friend, right? And so now that student is working at a small group mindset, right? But he also has that comfort of knowing, hey, I don't have so much pressure on my social skills. I'm going to tell you right now, that student knows the answer every single time. He does. I know he does. I know he does. He's brilliant. But that social piece is what keeps him from sharing that. So, what are we going to do to adapt that expectation and that skill so that he is also, hey, you know what? Phoning a friend means he's working on a social skill. It's just a smaller one than yelling in front of the entire class. So, if he's like, hey, I'm going to tell you what the answer is, and then my friend can say it, that works, right? So, remember that it can be woven into anything that you do. And it can be as simple as saying, hey, do you want to phone a friend this time? If you see that he's resistant, you see that he's waiting, you wanna phone a friend or do you want me to give you a clue? It's usually phone a friend. And there you go. You just changed your different and you adapted that skill for that student based on what he needed at that time. And so it can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be this massive thought out extended plan. It can be something as simple as just adapting it just slightly that way.
You have dropped so many examples throughout this entire conversation. I mean, one of the most overwhelming pieces of this high leverage practice is that there's so many options, like between accommodations, modifications, all the different needs of all the different students at all the different levels on all the different content. Like, oh my gosh, like how many different strategies am I leveraging to try to get a very diverse student population to try to hit that mark that, I'm trying to move them toward?
Mm.
How have you grown your toolbox? Like as a professional, like where do you get these strategies? How do you dream up these ideas?
I am a little nerdy and I love research. So I do have some background in clinical work where I learned a lot on that job and I learned a lot of those approaches that way. So through applied behavioral analysis has really helped me. However, I am a big observer. I'm also a big advocate to say that when I say I know it all, I'm probably not the smartest person in the room. Right. So I'm a big observer in the ways that I'll put myself out there and say, "Hey, I don't know how to do this," or "Hey, how are you doing this? Can I come watch? Can I come just see? Like, can I be nosy?" But I like to use my nosiness for power, right? And for information. And so if I can recognize what someone of my peers is doing really well or is really, really benefiting a student, how can I learn from that practice to embed it into a similar situation I might see down the road, right? So I especially coming from that clinical background. I've had a massive time doing that the past couple of years of sitting and watching and learning and understanding that these veteran teachers or these new teachers are coming in with all different perspectives. I'm also learning from people from different cultural backgrounds as well. I think that is pivotal too to the population that I work with as well. I live in a really diverse community, and a lot of my students, they don't have the same background as me, which in some ways is a strengthening thing, I think. But in other ways, I recognize that. And again, understanding that I don't know everything and I couldn't possibly know that. That might break down to me saying, I don't know what kind of brush they should use for our hairbrushing program because they have a different texture of hair than I do. And reaching out to people who are resourceful and saying, hey, humbly saying, hey, I don't know, can you give me some recommendations on how this would work? That can show up not just with hairbrushes, right? I had a veteran teacher this last year who said it to me, hey, I am tired and I have never in my 21 years of teaching ever had a class that I have struggled this much with behaviorally. What am I doing wrong? And I said, as much as I would love to say I'm going to have that answer for you exactly, and we're going to fix it all, what I will say is let's be a team. Let's look. And you know how much I learned from her, actually? And by the end of the year, her class was doing really, really well. She was feeling way more confident. And it was really cool to sit down and put our heads together and say, what are you already doing that works? Right. So I can learn and I can use that. But what do I kind of have in my back pocket that can help you too? And that collaboration, I think a lot of people drag their feet on, like where I've heard in the world that it's difficult to have those communications or those collaborations because, you know, when we're working it with our special needs students, that these kind of low incident populations, like we don't necessarily, in these self-contained, we don't necessarily get to connect with those general education teachers. But that's not to say that those general education teachers haven't absolutely had to be so creative with students who are unidentified in their population and had to learn how to teach those students too. So it's not a one-way street. I don't have all of the answers. And there is so much I can learn from everyone else. And that has kept my toolbox expanding, and putting myself in rooms and saying, I don't know, has expanded my toolbox far greater than it could have ever been if I walked into a room and saying, well, hey, I have some answers, right? If I walk in saying, I'm not sure, but let's look together, I have learned to be an ever evolving educator that continues to pull out weird, like you said, creative strategies that are informed. And I think that's the most important part is we have to, well, this strategy worked for this student. Well, that's unethical and you cannot do that. So let's make sure that we're informed, right? As we do these sort of things, right? We look at these veteran teachers and say, how have we evolved? How is education involved? And how can we take these old strategies maybe that work, but how do we shape them in a way that is more constructive than they could ever be? That's the point, right, Heather? That's the point, is to continue to grow and expand what we understand, what we know, and thus create an environment that is ultimately better, you know, in every room than it has been in the past. So that's the goal.
Thank you for showing how human education is, right? That we just get to show up and figure it out, right? Like we're not coming in like clueless. We're
Right.
coming in with lots of training, access to resources, but knowing that our colleagues are resources, that there are so many different ways to go find our own phone of friends to figure out, you know, how do I do this in a different way as I am trying new things, then my own toolbox is expanding. Thank you so much for just being so human about that, that it's not just having all the answers and knowing all the strategies and doing all the research so I can be like this master practitioner, that in reality, every single student is so completely unique that they're going to have their own combination of things that works for them in this moment. And then it's going to change. And then it's going to be in context with other students that are all having their own different kinds of needs as well. So thank you for clearly communicating that it is not like the end goal as a practitioner to know all the things, to have all the accommodations, to be able to, you know, dream up and do all these modifications. But instead, it's actually, how do I know who my people are and where can I go to get more ideas so that I can make those adjustments to either the curriculum or the instruction or how I'm trying to target these learning goals with, you know, incredibly like challenging students at times.
Hit the nail on the head with that, where it has to be a collaborative effort and a community effort. And just always bring, if there's a problem, and this has always been my go-to, if there's a problem, bring a solution. And it might not be the one that we end up on, but bring some sort of suggestion. And that's where we start to research. That's where we start to bring that information for ourselves and not rely solely on those resources, but understand that we can all bring something from our toolboxes to the table and see what tool fits best.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise here on High Leverage Practice 13. I've so appreciated this conversation.
Me too. Thank you.
Working with students who need long-term individualized support? Project Base is a 4-strand project designed for educators in self-contained classrooms serving students with low incident needs. You'll get step-by-step guidance on building a program that focuses on communication, daily routines, and real-world skill building. From setting up the classroom environment to designing personalized plans, this course helps you create a space where your students can grow and succeed in school and into adulthood. Led by Chris Zielinski and Carly Dietz, Project Base offers practical strategies, case studies, and planning tools to help you confidently support your students every step of the way. If you're ready to strengthen your program and build something that lasts, this project is your next step. If you're supporting emotional or behavioral needs in general ed or resource classrooms, Project Thrive helps you keep learning on track. And if you're in a therapeutic or alternative setting, building something from the ground up, Project Onward offers the structure and tools to do it well. Head to university.thresholdlearning.org to meet your team and begin building your home base today.
In the field of special education, one of the most crucial roles a teacher plays is adapting curriculum materials and tasks to meet the individualized needs of students with disabilities. Every student has unique goals outlined in their IEP, and it's the educator's job to ensure that the material is accessible and engaging. This often requires modifying how the information is presented. For example, teachers might highlight the most relevant information or simplify task directions to make the content more digestible. They might also adjust the amount or complexity of the material, tailoring it specifically to the needs of each student. When a student struggles with reading or processing information independently, teachers can make substitutions like audio taping the content, reading it out loud, or using other media to relay the same information. They may also work one-on-one with students to break down complex concepts. Simplifying text can involve creating abridged versions or providing summaries that still capture the essence of the content but make it more approachable. Key concepts might be emphasized by using tools like study guides or previews to help students retain the most important information. In addition to these adaptations, special educators often employ content enhancements, strategies designed to structure the material in ways that help students better engage with and retain information. Graphic organizers, for instance, offer a visual representation of concepts, showing how ideas are connected in a way that's easy to understand. These tools help students see relationships between ideas, whether they're hierarchical, comparative, or sequential. Thanks to the vast array of web-based resources available, teachers can customize these organizers to suit their classroom's specific needs. Another effective strategy is guided notes. These are teacher-prepared handouts that guide students through lectures by providing cues and spaces for them to write down key information. This not only keeps the students engaged, but also gives them a reliable model for taking notes that they can refer to later when studying for exams or assessments. It's an interactive way to ensure students are actively involved during lessons. Then, there are mnemonical devices, which are especially powerful for students who need help remembering large amounts of unfamiliar information. Whether it's through letter strategies, keyword methods, or pegword techniques, mnemonics create a bridge between new information and something more familiar, making it easier to recall facts or concepts. Again, teachers have access to numerous online tools to create personalized mnemonics tailored to their lessons. In short, special educators are constantly adapting and enhancing their teaching methods to ensure every student has the best chance to succeed. From modifying materials to employing strategies that make content more memorable, they're creating pathways to learning that are as diverse as the students they serve. In the U.S., the law mandates that individualized education programs, or IEPs, must be aligned with the grade level standards for the student, even if that student is performing below that level. This creates a unique challenge for special education teachers. As educators craft both long and short term goals, HLP 11, and design instruction to meet these goals, HLP 10, the use of curriculum adaptations becomes essential. These adaptations, broken down into accommodations and modifications, play a critical role in bridging the gap between where the student currently is and where they need to be to meet the standards. The most effective educators aren't simply selecting adaptations from a checklist, they're thinking strategically. They look at what each individual student needs and adjust accordingly, often leveraging key accommodations and modifications to ensure that students can access the curriculum in meaningful ways. This process helps drive both learning and behavioral success. What's especially important here is that the effective adaptations are not one size fits all. A skilled special educator draws from multiple sources of data, HLP 4, working collaboratively with colleagues, HLP 1, and family members, HLP 3, to create a comprehensive understanding of the student's needs. This collaboration ensures that the adaptations are targeted and impactful. Teachers then regularly monitor how well these adaptations are working, adjusting them as needed to maximize the student's learning outcomes, HLP 6. So it's not just about following the law, it's about being innovative and responsive to each student's unique journey. Adaptations are a dynamic tool that, when used thoughtfully, can open up real pathways to success for students with disabilities. Teachers who are effective at adapting curriculum materials and tasks know that it all starts with intentional differentiation. They don't just throw out the same lesson for everyone and hope it sticks. Instead, they carefully tailor their approach to meet each student's unique needs. For example, they'll take a close look at the task directions, identifying any complex vocabulary or long winded sentences that might trip students up, and simplify these instructions. Pairing those directions with visuals can further support students, giving them a clearer picture of how to complete a task. Technology is also a powerful tool in this process, helping students grasp concepts that might otherwise seem out of reach. By using the right tech, teachers can make tasks more interactive and accessible. They don't stop at one strategy either. They know that combining multiple adaptations boosts the chances of student success. Whether it's cutting down the amount of contents students need to work through or adjusting the difficulty level of tasks to fit each student's readiness. They also make sure that the key information doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Whether it's in a text, a lecture, or a worksheet, they highlight the most important ideas so students know exactly what to focus on. Guided notes are another tool they use, giving students a structured way to follow along, while gradually helping them improve their own note-taking skills over time. And let's not forget about graphic organizers. These are incredibly effective for showing relationships between ideas, and teachers don't just hand them out. They explicitly teach students how to use them and scaffold that learning. On top of that, mnemonic strategies come into play, giving students clever ways to remember the essential pieces of the lesson. Whether it's a catchy phrase or an acronym, these memory aids are key to helping students retain information long term. In the end, teachers who excel at adapting materials don't just help their students keep up, they empower them to succeed. One of the most important things school leaders can do to support their teachers is to ensure that educators have a solid understanding of the range of adaptations available to meet their students' individualized needs. This goes beyond just knowing the basics. It's about giving teachers the tools and knowledge to be flexible and creative in their approach. It's essential that teachers can identify and implement adaptations that fit not only the student's needs, but also the demands of the curriculum. This kind of strategic alignment is what leads to effective learning. For novice educators, it can be tempting to over-accommodate, providing too many supports without stepping back to assess whether those adaptations are really necessary. This is where school leaders come in. By guiding teachers to use data and regularly adjust their instruction, leaders help prevent over-accommodation and ensure that the focus stays on fostering independence and growth in students. It's also crucial for leaders to encourage their staff to think beyond the typical go-to accommodations, like extended time or preferential seating. Those can be useful, but there's so much more potential when teachers get creative. Leaders can challenge their educators to move beyond the pre-written lists and, again, rely on data to evaluate whether the adaptations they're using are truly impacting students' performance in a meaningful way. That's where the real growth happens, when teachers are empowered to innovate and make decisions that directly connect to their students' success. Assessing the strength of research support for curricular and material adaptations is challenging due to the wide range of purposes these adaptations serve. Whether it's highlighting important content, simplifying task directions, or adjusting the amount and depth of material, adaptations are applied in various ways depending on individual student needs. This includes the use of instructional practices like graphic organizers, guided notes, and mnemonic devices, which can be employed either on their own or together. With such variability and a focus on ever-changing student outcomes, it's difficult to pinpoint a singular, comprehensive measure of their effectiveness. However, when we look at specific content enhancement approaches, there is enough empirical support to suggest that these strategies do make a positive difference in student learning. What remains to be explored more thoroughly is how these broader intervention packages of curricular adaptations are implemented. Key questions include: what types of adaptations are most effective? How do we ensure they are used with fidelity? And perhaps most importantly, what impact do these adaptations have on critical student outcomes? Further research is needed to determine which adaptations are not only effective, but also efficient and socially acceptable in various educational settings. The logic behind adapting instructional materials is clear. When teachers substitute, simplify, or highlight essential content, they increase the likelihood that all students, especially those with disabilities, will meet their learning goals. Yet, despite widespread recognition of this need, research shows that many teachers still fail to make the necessary modifications. This gap between understanding and action suggests that more attention should be directed toward the actual implementations of these instructional modifications, and importantly, how they influence student outcomes. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Join us next week when Heather sits down with our board-certified behavior analyst, Alex Grosso, to talk about our next high-leverage practice.
Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, consider dropping a like and follow @ThresholdLearningTLC on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you like our show, share the podcast with your colleagues. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to promote the podcast. Let them know that they can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that they catch their podcast. Just be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. You can email us at info@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. You can find everything you're looking for at thresholdlearning.org. See you there. Attention educators pursuing behavior analysis certification and universities preparing them for success. Supervision with TLC offers 100% remote fieldwork supervision designed specifically for school-based professionals. Educators can earn their hours right in their schools without leaving their classroom, all while being supported by experienced BCBAs who understand the realities of education. With month-to-month scheduling, affordable rates, and both live video and asynchronous chat, our fieldwork supervision model is designed to fit into your life, not the other way around. We also invite universities to enhance their graduate programs in partnership with our team of practicing school-based BCBAs. Our fieldwork supervision model keeps students on track for certification by helping them connect their practice to all exam domains so that they can confidently pass the exam. Explore more at university.thresholdlearning.org/supervision or email supervision@thresholdlearning.org to connect. Supervision with TLC, where educators grow into behavior analysts.